Chuck Brown and Trevor Fraley's Scar miniseries is a book that finds itself on one end of the creative freedom spectrum, having almost none. It is a comic that is constrained by the 80 pages it has to fill and the already established world of The Lion King. It's even harder for the creators to make a compelling story for this book because it takes place before the events of the first Lion King movie, meaning it can't do anything bold, interesting, or unexpected. It's kind of cool seeing how Scar made an alliance with the hyenas and how he discovered the danger of stampedes, which he would later use to kill Mufasa, but it isn't that special of a tale to me. Again, it's not the creator's fault, it's just hard to make an epic story with so little narrative freedom. But what lies on the other end of the spectrum? What does total creative freedom and soaring ambition look like? And is it better? Well, if you give one passionate, creative, near-complete creative freedom, they can create something legendary. The Parker series by Darwin Cook, My Favorite Thing is Monsters by Emil Ferris, The Essex County by Jeff Lemire, these are all critically acclaimed comics that were passionately written and drawn by a single individual who let their personal experiences, inspirations, and tastes shape the art they created, and it worked out well for them. But not every expression of creativity leads to something epic. Sometimes it leads to Something Epic by Szymon Kudranski, a comic that I followed last year that I'm extremely conflicted by. A comic that represents the good, the bad, but ultimately the beauty that comes as a result of endless ambition and no limits. Before we talk about the comic in question, though, we have to talk about the guy behind it. Szymon Kudranski has been working on comics for almost 2 decades now and started his career as an artist on the horror comic by IDW 30 Days of Night, Annual 1. But since then, he has worked on a ton of books for a variety of publishers. He's been the penciler on Action Comics and Green Arrow for DC Comics, and The Punisher and Fallen Angels for Marvel Comics. But I think he's most famous for his work on the long-running Spawn series, where he worked on the title consistently from issue 201 until issue 250, and then returned a few times afterward. His art style that features realistically rendered characters and blurred backgrounds can be off-putting to some, but it definitely has its place in the industry. His skill in drawing terrifying creatures and dedication to realism are perfect for comics that are serious, grounded, and dark. Under the right blacks and shadows, his art makes for spooky and sinister atmospheres that drag you to their dark depths. But when his characters step into the light, their flaws are often made apparent, and the art loses a lot of its power. Some issues he draws are flawless from front to back, but others have panels that break your immersion as a reader. Despite some issues with his art, I really do appreciate his work though. It's cool seeing his progress and improvement over the years, and it's even cooler seeing him spread his wings for the first time in a solo project all to his own. In 2023, for the first time in his nearly 2-decade career, he would no longer be narratively bound by a writer or artistically restricted by a colorist. Aside from a letterer, translator, and editor, Szymon Kudranski would be free to unleash his creative potential. And the result of that? Something epic. Something Epic is probably one of the wildest and most ambitious comics released last year. Just looking at the cover of the first issue, we see a clenched fist raised high with a multitude of characters in different art styles surrounding it. We see streaks of lightning surround the page, and we know that the comic promises something grand and epic. This cover grabbed my attention, which is why I pre-ordered the book. It looked like a comic that celebrated art and creativity, and it turned out to be exactly that. Boiling down something epic to its core, it is a story about the power of art and imagination. It's about how our minds and hearts can conjure up wondrous and terrifying things that can affect ourselves and others. It is a tribute and love letter to art of every medium, from manga to video games to animation. We follow this lonely boy named Danny who can see a realm beyond ours, one where creations of man take physical form. He's able to see fictional characters around him, from 64-bit video game characters walking down the street to vampires living in his house. This is such a crazy, ambitious premise for a comic creator to have for their first solo series, but there is no denying Szymon Kudranski's capability in executing this book artistically. The art in this series is mind-blowing. Reading the first issue, I was surprised to find out that the interior art was just as detailed as the art on the cover. It's an extremely bold undertaking to capture characters from every art form and put them under one setting, and Szymon manages to pull it off spectacularly. Kudranski draws all these characters in different styles flawlessly, capturing the magic of each medium he integrates into his wild comic book world. But not only do the characters look incredible individually, seeing them together on the page creates scenes that feel fantastical, larger than life, and bring out the child in me, if I'm going to be honest. A way that the art ties all these dramatically different characters together is through coloring. Each page is usually lit with a single color. Sometimes it's gray, blue, or purple. And if something horrifying is happening, the page is drowned and drenched in bright red. The generally minimalist color palette works extremely well in this book. Not only does it fix a common problem with Kudranski's art where a character sticks out like a sore thumb due to different coloring, but having each image be color-coded creates powerful panels and pages that evoke intense emotion and help make the narrative more powerful. The pages being colored in grays and browns during the start of the comic showcase the mundanity and dullness of modern life. And when colored creatures appear on the streets, they stand out, and this time around, they're supposed to. Through the colors and visual presentation, we see the importance of these fictional characters, spicing up and giving excitement to Danny's otherwise boring and lonely life. When Danny sees his mom at her deathbed, the orange glow of the sunset thematically signals her tragic end. The light from the window illuminating the dim room makes their final conversation feel all the more intimate and heavenly. And when scenes involving Danny's dark side emerge, the red that consumes the page makes the scene all the more terrifying and hopeless. The art in Something Epic is my favorite thing about it. Not only is it technically impressive, but also enhances the storytelling and showcases sights we rarely see in the world of comics. Unfortunately, that's the best thing I can say about the book, because the quality of the story doesn't quite match the art. The comic's plot is divided into two very different sections. The first 2.5 issues revolve around Danny as a lonely young boy navigating a dimension of reality only he is capable of seeing, and interacting with it in subtle and not so subtle ways. Danny finds connection and comfort with the creatures in this reality, but is also isolated because of it. Everyone thinks he's crazy and delusional for being able to see the things he sees, and he doesn't exactly live a happy life because of it. What makes his life even harder is that his mom, who works 2 jobs to support the family, gets cancer. The dark days at the hospital following the depressing diagnosis make us learn more about the comics world though. We see that the fantastical characters that inhabit Danny's world are drawn to intense emotion, whether negative or positive. In the same issue, we also find out that these two realities can affect each other. A Texan superhero and manga character wreck the car of Danny's aunt, and a few pages later, Danny stops a green 8-bit monster from mugging a purple video game case simply using his powerful emotions and imaginations. The first 2.5 issues are pretty moving and exciting in my opinion. It's cool seeing this new world for the first time and all it has to offer. It's easy to sympathize with and care about the main protagonist, as sickness and loneliness are facets of human experience that hit close to home. What's weird in my opinion is what happens after. After Danny's mother passes away, we skip 10 years into the future, a future where nothing is the same. The story from here on out is completely different and focuses on an even more isolated and depressed Danny who lives in a small house in the countryside and has stopped letting his imagination run wild. But when his own darkness emerges and attacks him, a guy named Alter comes to the rescue. And through him, we learn a lot about this imaginative reality. We visit the lands of broken dreams and the temple of creativity where Danny sees Image Comics characters and meets Glasses and Dahlia, creations that were involved in his childhood. We also learn that Danny is part of a group called the Epics, who have the responsibility of taking care of this world. There is honestly so much that happens throughout issues 4 to 7. Too much in my opinion. Danny learns about the creative world and his place in it, participates in an impossibly difficult game that tests the versatility of his creations, battles his nightmares which risk ruining the source of imagination, and saves the entire realm of creativity. The latter half of the comic feels extremely overwhelming and scatterbrained for my tastes, with so much happening so quickly that sequences intended to be impactful don't hit as hard as they should. What started out as a story focusing on a boy's internal struggle turns into a wild roller coaster of events that I don't know how to feel about. By the end of the 7th issue, it feels like there's nothing left for Danny to do that would top the story arc he just had. And I'm pretty sure Simon feels this too, because the next arc of the series, releasing this month, focuses on an entirely different set of characters. What's funny about the comic is that even though the comic story is extremely rushed, its pace can feel extremely slow due to the excessive amount of text. Issue 2 starts with barely any text, with the first page only containing the word words. Issue 3 starts with another nearly wordless page, only containing the word dreams. Issue 4, like the other two, begins with only one word, darkness. But what's crazy isn't the lack of words, it is what happens in the following pages. Issue 2 has a whole essay about words that contains a section on the history of language and a story on how NASA put visual records of humanity on their spacecrafts just in case it encounters aliens. What follows the third issue's first page, which only contains the word dreams, is a double-page spread with another think piece, this time on dreams, the statistics we have on them, and the role our imagination has when we're in them. And you would know by now what follows the first page of the 4th issue. The problem with Something Epic's text isn't just the sheer amount of it on occasions, it's how a lot of it isn't relevant to the main story. In fact, I really appreciate some walls of text in comics. Howard the Duck, issue 2 from 1976, has a whole page dedicated to the conversation between a sentient turnip and the guy whose body it is planning to take over, and it is a hilarious scene that stands the test of time. On the other hand, a lot of Something Epic's monologues don't directly forward the story in any sensible way. That's totally fine on some occasions, and I do like a lot of what these blocks of text have to say. It just doesn't suit the medium of comics to have them this frequently. Heck, even when the text matters in the context of the story, it sometimes is a chore to read because of its density and presentation. It's kind of a shame that a book this visually appealing is flooded with text that covers the art. Thankfully, it's not always bad, with some issues having pretty decent flow and a balance between art and text. All in all, Something Epic is an ambitious project by a passionate artist that falls short of perfection, a book that I am extremely conflicted with. But despite my criticisms of it, it is a comic that has imprinted itself on my mind, and I think that's because of how risky and extreme it is. From its ambitious premise that attempts to pay tribute to the entire world of art, its extremely daring task of visually capturing the magic of each artistic medium, its bonkers page layouts that I will never forget, and its emotional, action-packed story that tries to do and say a multitude of things. Kudranski doesn't waste his first opportunity to create a comic of his own, choosing to take the risky road in every aspect of this work. And those extremes make the book stand out in my opinion, even if I may not adore all of its choices. Something Epic shows that there is value in doing something ambitious and creative, even if it doesn't lead to perfect results. I've forgotten the plots and premises of a fair share of comics I bought last year, but this comic has lived in my head rent-free since the first issue came out because it is just so weird and interesting. Something Epic represents a pivotal point in Szymon Kudranski's career, a comic that shows his mastery as an artist while also being his debut as a writer. But to me, this series is a reminder of the interesting art that can come from personal ambition and creative risk, the quirky and memorable tales told when creators are allowed to let loose. My name is Joshua C, and I will see you in the next comic book video.